Hey everybody, Rose Matter here with a video that quite a few of you have asked me to do, and I am finally able to sit down and give you guys my thoughts about the Danganronpa 3 Despair, Future, and Hope anime. A couple things before I start. First of all, this is going to be a pretty obvious one, but I'm going to be putting up a major spoiler warning for you guys. For those of you who have not watched these animes, turn off the video, go watch those first if you're interested, and then come back because I will be spoiling some major plot points. Also, on that note, this isn't going to be a typical review style video. I'm not going to be giving like a rating system or anything. I'm just going to give kind of like my thoughts about the animes, things I liked, things I disliked, that kind of thing. On that note, it's going to be a little bit discombobulated. I will divide them up into like Despair, Future, and Hope arc and my thoughts about them, and then kind of like an overview, but I'm not going to be going like into the story of them very in depth. I'm going to be kind of touching on them. This is going to be basically me word vomiting my thoughts about them. I have like 15 pages worth of notes that I took while I was watching them, so I'm going to kind of refer to those notes. So I apologize if this isn't going to be like a really professionally done review, but the TLDR of would I recommend the anime? Did I enjoy it? Yeah, I did. I enjoyed the animes. I would recommend watching them if you like Danganronpa. I assume most of you who are watching this video already have seen the animes, so I'm kind of speaking to the choir, but on that note, let me just get right into my thoughts. So, I apologize in advance. I will be looking down at my notes quite a bit, so I hope that's not too distracting. First, I'm going to get into the Despair arc and what I liked and didn't like about it. So first thing I have in my notes is I really enjoyed the light tone of the first few episodes that really focused on the characters from Danganronpa 2 and the new character who's introduced, Chisa, who is their teacher, who also has a little bit of a ulterior motive. I really did enjoy Chisa, but my big thing was I love the Class 77 so much, so anytime I get to spend with them, I always enjoy. I do wish they kind of like delve into more of who they were as people. Before they became Remnants of Despair, it was kind of a lot of the same things that you would see in the game, so we didn't learn that much about the characters, but I understand because they had a lot of other things that they had to get through in the anime, a lot of side plots and things like that. I do wish that there had just been more of character developments for the characters from the game, sorry, but overall I really did like the first couple of episodes. It was just very light, and I kind of wish it had stayed like that. It was really nice seeing them, all happy and friends before everything happened. On the note of like the tone of the Despair arc, it is called Despair arc, so of course it is going to get darker, and it was one issue I had is I felt that the tonal shift was a little bit too quick. I wish they had been a little bit more gradual about it, but I do understand they had to, do it all in 12 episodes, so they kind of had to like keep things moving along, but I felt like it would have been more effective if it had kept that happy tone for longer, just to really hammer home when it does get dark. It's just that much more jarring. And I talked about Chisa before, so there's the whole thing about Chisa, Juzo, and Kyosuke. I hope I pronounced those names correctly. I have to say I wasn't a big fan of like their whole side story about, trying to figure out the secrets of Hope's Peak Academy. I understand why they had to delve into that side story, but whenever the three of them were on screen or they were talking amongst each other, I was just like, I just want to get back to the class. Like that's who I want to focus on. So it's just whenever they were talking about their whole plans, I kind of tuned out a little bit. It's just my opinion on that. Just wasn't really too interested in their side story. But one character that I really did enjoy, you guys know this if you watch my Let's Play of Danganronpa 2, is I love Chiaki, and they really developed her character in this anime. She was definitely a central character, and she was a driving force for a lot of what happened. And I understand a lot of people say that she's Mary Sue, and I see where you guys are coming from. She just seems a little bit too perfect. The anime even more so, but I understand why they had to make her that way. when her death does come, you have to believe that her classmates are so devastated by her death that they would, fall into despair and become remnants of despair. So they had to kind of make her like a very special character that everybody loved. It's like Chisa said, everybody loves you, and that's why you are the perfect person to kind of kickstart Junko's plan to have her classmates fall into despair. Another thing I really enjoyed was her relationship with Hajime. It was kind of touched upon in the game a little bit, but you really get to see the backstory of how they met and their friendship and maybe a potential romance that unfortunately never happens due to the circumstances. It was really upsetting when Hajime basically rejected what Chiaki said about how it's not your talents that makes you special and what makes life worth living, it's your relationships with other people. And he basically took what she said and just like threw it right out, because then he went into surgery and became Izuru, and in doing so he kind of forgot who she was. But there was a really touching moment at the end where he kind of had that moment where he remembered who she was and he started to cry, and that was just really touching, and it kind of like even bolsters the game that much more, because you realize why it seemed that Hajime and Chiaki were kind of drawn to each other. It was almost like, even though he didn't remember who she was, there was that part of him that, I don't know, I guess just subconsciously like knew that she was someone important to him. So I really did love Chiaki in the anime, and she's best girl. I have touched upon Junko's, like, her big plan and how it came to fruition, and I guess I was a little disappointed by the revelation of how she managed to kickstart the tragedy. The game hammers home that she managed to get people to do what she wants through like sheer will and her force of personality and her charisma, and then it turns out, no, it was a brainwashing video. That's how she got everybody to like kill each other and become despair. It kind of felt like a little bit of a cop-out. I did like the delve into Junko's personality a little bit more. You kind of get to see what makes her tick, you see what drives her even more so, and you do see those little snippets of her using her like charisma to manipulate people, like with Izuru and Mikan to an extent, definitely with Ryota, I think. Is that how you pronounce it? The animator, I believe that's how you pronounce his name. Correct me if I'm wrong. So you see that she can manipulate people, but like, how cool would that have been if you had seen her be able to take like each individual student who becomes the remnant of despair, and she like individually manipulates them, pinpointing their insecurities and things about them, about their personalities, and using that to her advantage. It would have just made her look so much more cunning, and it would have really made you believe that much more that Junko is just this very like smart villain. But now the brainwashing, I understand for like time purposes they couldn't show her like manipulate each person, but like I just felt like that would have been so much more effective. So while I did feel that the future arc was more suspenseful and held kind of a really tense feeling throughout the arc, the despair arc, when it wanted to be disturbing, it knocked it out of the park. There are a few moments in the despair arc that, to me, were the most disturbing and upsetting, and not just the anime, but like the entire series so far. Obviously, I haven't played V3 yet, so I can't say, how that compares to that, but there's two moments from the despair arc in particular. The first was the student council killings. Holy shit, like, you hear about that over and over throughout the first two games, about how, like, the student council killings, all that stuff, but to actually see it happen, to see these, friends turn on each other almost on a dime, and just showing their killings in, like, brutal detail, and just, it really hammered home just how disturbing it was and how, like, fucked up it is. So that was really effective, but even more so, to me, probably the most upsetting thing I have ever seen in the Danganronpa series was Chiaki's execution. It might make me seem like a little bit of a baby, but watching Chiaki's execution actually almost made me have to stop watching the show. After I finished that episode, I had to, like, step away, and I had to just, like, okay, I can't watch anymore tonight, I need to take a break. It was just, Like, the thing about the Danganronpa executions in the game is they are relatively tame. They're pretty quick. They don't show you a lot of gore. It's a lot of, like, you have to, you know, imagine them in your head. And that's what makes it disturbing, but they show, like, everything in detail. Every little, like, skewer and spike going through her, every wince of pain, and just having her friends watch it. It's despair-inducing. I really felt like I was kind of in her friend's shoes watching this person that you care about, and they are just being horribly tortured, and you can't do anything to help them, and you just kind of have to watch helpless, and it really, it was really effective. My husband and I, we both were just very disturbed after, and I actually had a nightmare the night I watched it about me being, like, skewered and stabbed by spikes. So congrats, Danganronpa Despair Arc, like, very, very good job on accomplishing what you wanted to do. So overall, what I have to say about Despair Arc is between that and Future Arc, I'm not going to count Hope because that was just, like, one episode. I did like Future Arc a little bit more, but I really did enjoy Despair Arc. I felt that it was trying to cram too many storylines into, like, 12 episodes. You know, there's a whole thing about Junko and Mukuro and Izuru, and the whole thing with Chisa and Juzo and Kyosuke and their whole plan, and then you got, like, the students, Class 77, you're kind of following them as well. And I just felt like the pacing was a little off because they were trying to put so much storyline into 12 episodes. So I felt like a few more episodes would have helped with the pacing a little bit, but I do feel like Despair Arc hit those emotional moments better than the Future Arc, just because with Despair Arc we're focused on characters that we know and we love and we're more connected to, whereas Future Arc threw a bunch of new characters in that we don't really have much time to get attached to, which I will, you know, touch on that later. But overall, yeah, I really did like Despair Arc, and there are some moments that I don't think I will be forgetting anytime soon. I definitely feel like when I think about the two animes, there are moments from Despair Arc that just stuck with me a little bit more. But yeah, let's get into Future Arc and what I thought about that. Alright, so with Future Arc, just like I had an issue with the pacing in Despair Arc, I also did have an issue with the pacing in Future Arc, but for a little bit of a different reason. And if I had to describe it in one word, it would be scattered. So Future Arc was kind of all over the place. It was like one episode would focus on, like, a few characters and their backstories and their relationships with each other, whereas another episode would basically just be completely focused on, like, solving the murder mystery. So it was a little bit all over the place, especially the first, I would say, half, just because there were so many characters that were introduced and they didn't really get a lot of screen time. Like, some did get more than others. Once the character numbers dropped down, it did get a little bit better because you could focus on the characters left in more detail, and I felt like they got more equal screen time, so it worked out a little bit better. And, you know, the last half were just basically focused on, like, okay, we need to figure out this mystery, all the parts start kind of coming together. So the second half was really good in terms of pacing, but I felt like the first half was a little lackluster. So on the note of characters, that is the one big knock I had against the Future Arc, was there were just so many characters introduced and you really didn't get to know too much about them. They felt very one notes. They were essentially stereotypes with, like, one defining feature. Some of them had kind of interesting designs, like the guy with the horse head was memorable because of that, but I wouldn't be able to tell you a lot of these characters. I wouldn't be able to tell you what their names were, what their ultimates were. I didn't really know anything about them, and then when they got killed off, I couldn't care less. Once you get down about halfway and there's, like, a small central group of characters, it was definitely a lot better. You got to know the characters more, their motivations, their personalities. Some of them you got to, you know, find out more about them. Okay, so I'm going to go on a bit of a rant here. Side note, I hated Ruruka. I think that's her name, the confectionist. I hated her character so much. If I'm ever going to do a list about like most hated Danganronpa characters, I think she's probably going to be on the list. I don't know if the creators meant to make her so disliked. If so, congratulations, you guys like knocked it out of the park. She was just so whiny and self-centered and selfish and basically using people for her own gain. And they tried to, I think, redeem her character towards the end, and they just failed completely. I just didn't understand why she got so much screen time and character development that could have been, I felt used on characters who deserved it more. But anyway, that's a side note. I hated her. Guys, let me know. Did you dislike her character too? Did you find that she got, she was redeemed or she became more sympathetic? I don't think so. I know that's probably not important. I wrote that in my notes and I just felt like I had to, mention it. Alright, so I mentioned before about how I felt like the pacing was a little kind of off, but overall I feel like the future arc did a really good job at maintaining like suspense and tension and stress. It always seemed to end on cliffhangers. It made you want to keep watching. I liked the fact that it was kind of like a claustrophobic type of setting, similar to the games where they're locked in a building together and they have to try and figure out this mystery. I just felt like it was very in line with the games, and I enjoyed the kind of feel of Future Arc a little bit better. It maintained its tone, I felt, better than Despair Arc. I do understand why Despair Arc, it kind of like it wanted to show you the happy times before it went to Despair just to make you that much more upset, but I don't know, I just like kind of the pacing and the tone of Future Arc a little bit better. I felt like the clues were pretty strategically laid out also throughout the show, so you were trying to figure things out along with the characters, and then just when you think you might have an idea of what happens, just like in the games, it kind of pulls out the rug from under you, it throws another red herring at you, and it's, I don't know, I just thought it was effective. It was fun to try and like solve the mystery, although I did kind of have a feeling that suicide was probably something to do with it because there was that one murder that happened in a closed room, but I kind of had a feeling early on that it was probably not necessarily like one person killing people, but rather suicides. On that note, I know I ranted about the Despair Arc using brainwashing to get people to like kill each other and themselves as kind of a cop-out, but I did like the use of it in Future Arc. I felt that it was kind of like a nice bridge between the two arcs. So I did enjoy that aspect. That part kind of caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting that. So speaking of twists and red herrings, I felt like it was almost a little bit overkill in the anime. I know the games are notorious for doing it, but that's over the course of like 30 hours, so it has time to throw twists at you, and it feels like it does it in a good pace, but because this is restricted to 12 episodes, it was just like, it felt like every episode was like, oh, you thought it was this? Nope. Nope, that's not it. It might be this now. It might be this. They had like so many potential masterminds or villains. Like they kept trying to put suspicion on everyone, like Kyosuke and Tengen and Ryota, and just it was a little exhausting. And I admit I did kind of get caught up in it. I basically suspected like everyone that I think the show wanted me to suspect. Like I suspected Tengen. I was like, okay, he probably has something to do with it because he's the president of Future Foundation. And then when Chisa was introduced, I was like, oh, she seems suspicious, like right from the get-go. But I did find like having her killed off in the first episode was like a nice kind of subversion of that. And then when Ryota was introduced, I was like, okay, he probably has something to do with it as well. So I just felt like they were trying too hard to like be clever and throw those red herrings out at us. And speaking of frustrating twists, the whole thing with like the fake out deaths with Hina and Kyoko just felt like I felt betrayed. Not betrayed might be a little bit of a harsh term, but I felt played, and I just felt like they were really cheap. Like especially the Hina one where it's like, oh, she's been stabbed. Next episode, oh no, she's fine. Like at least with the Kyoko one, it kind of let you sit in it for a while, and you thought, okay, wow, she's actually dead. Wow, like Danganronpa just like upping the stakes there. And then there was the whole thing where it's like, oh no, she's magically okay now, and it just felt really cheap. But it was effective. Like my husband and I, when those things happened, we were like yelling at the screen. So it was effective, but then like once they got resolved, I felt like, okay, that did feel like, it didn't feel like the games where it feel like they were earned. These ones just felt cheap. So on the note of cheap twists and things just thrown into the show just to kind of like throw us off, was having Monica in the killing games. And Monica in the Ultra Despair Girls game was such an interesting character, and I felt like she was a really effective villain. So I was excited when she showed up, but then she was just in it for like 2 episodes, and then we find out like, oh, nope, I got nothing to do with it, and now I'm going to space, lol. It just felt like a waste of her character, and I felt like it was just kind of like a nod to Ultra Despair Girls and nothing more. So, a little disappointed about that. I wish she had played more of a part in the future arc. So I realize I haven't talked about the killing game itself very much, and I gotta say I really did enjoy how they did it for the show. It had to be different from the game because you don't have very much time to have all this happen. You've got 12 episodes as opposed to, 30, 40 hours in the game, so it's got to be more quick-paced. So the idea that a killing has to happen, I believe, every 8 hours or 4 hours, I thought that was really clever, and I really enjoyed the addition of the forbidden actions. I thought that was a really cool addition, and it was kind of fun watching the characters. They would monitor each other and they would try and figure out what each other's forbidden actions were. It was kind of weird that like some characters had forbidden actions that pertained to kind of their personality. Like there was Ruruka's boyfriend who couldn't eat anything, which kind of makes sense because you can see he's always eating the candy. So that made sense. But then there was the one, what was the guy's name who wore like the fedora? The one who saved Kyoko. His was like, he can't open his left hand. It just felt really random, and it only kind of came into play in that one moment where he had to grab Kyoko as she was falling and save her. So that kind of felt like a weird one. I kind of wish that the forbidden actions all related to the characters more rather than some just having some really random ones. But overall, I just felt like the killing game in the future arc was really well done. Okay, so on to kind of the end of the future arc. Another issue I had was the revelation about who set up this whole thing, who the mastermind is. You find out it's Tengen, and his reasoning for why he did it was so far-fetched. So I don't know if I have this right. Maybe I'm completely off, and you guys can let me know. So he started this whole thing up. He wanted this whole killing game in order to have Ryota kind of like get him to the breaking point so that he would use his brainwashing video in order to get people to stop killing each other. What? Like, I don't understand his reasoning, and there was this kind of like part where I think Hyosuke said to Tengen, well, why didn't you just ask Ryota to like give him the video? And he was like, oh, I can't do that because he has to do it of his own free will or something. Like, it was just kind of this hand waving away of, something that makes no sense. And I had to rewind that part a couple times just to be like, did I hear that right? Like, that's the whole reason this whole thing was set up. Like, I still don't know if I got that part completely wrong. I know there's a whole thing with like where Chisa gave the video to Tengen, and I'm still not sure if Tengen did all this for the sake of hope or if he was brainwashed as well. Little confused about that. So I feel like in the games when they like have the big revelation of like what's going on, it kind of all clicks into place and you're like, oh my god, it makes perfect sense. With this one, I was just flabbergasted. I didn't understand it at all. So that was another issue I had with the future arc. So I know it sounds like I was bitching and ranting and criticizing future arc a lot, but like I said before, I did prefer it over Despair arc just by a little bit. I think the one thing I liked about it is it felt like a tight, self-contained like murder mystery, and I just felt like it was more in line with the tone of the games, and it felt almost like a game. You couldn't really play it, but you could try and guess what was going to happen. Figure out the mystery. It felt like you were participating a little bit more. The cliffhangers were really effective. It had me like just excited to watch the next episode. So I I did say I had issues with the pacing of Future Arc, but not quite as much as Despair Arc, so overall I did enjoy Future Arc just a little bit more. The one knock I have about it was, like I said, the fact that there were just too many new characters introduced and I didn't care about them as much as, you know, the Despair Arc, where it just felt more emotionally effective for me. Alright, so now on to the Hope Arc, and this is where I kind of feel like things start to fall apart a little bit. The first big knock I have on it, and this might be another thing where I just didn't understand it or there was something I missed, was why were all the students from Class 77 alive in the real world? Because it was mentioned multiple times in the game by Monokuma that the characters who died in the simulation died in real life as well. They were essentially brain dead. So, like, how did they all manage to survive and then they came to save the day? It just felt very, like, fan fiction-y a little bit, like, fan service-y. It just kind of came out of nowhere. And don't get me wrong, I love the Danganronpa 2 characters. You guys know this. Any opportunity I have to, like, get to see them and they get to interact with each other, and it was great to see, you know, they did kind of, like, break out of their despair and they became good people. That was great. I just didn't quite understand how they all were there. So if you guys can explain that to me, please let me know, and maybe I can amend this, like, issue I had with it. Maybe I just didn't understand it. And I get, like the Despair Arc being full of despair, the Hope Arc, there had to be some hope, but I felt like it just ended on too happy of an end for me. Danganronpa series is about kind of uncertainty. There's that hope there, but there's also, like, you don't know how things are gonna go. It's kind of bittersweet, but with this, it just seemed like everyone seemed to get a happy ending. And even, like, Ryota, who, albeit unwillingly, kind of caused all of this, like, stuff to happen, all these people to die. Like, he basically just got a free pass, was instantly forgiven. Everybody's cool with it. The exception to this is Kyosuke. You know, he kind of had that, I felt, the one ending where you're not sure how it's gonna go. You know, he lost his best friend, his love, he lost, you know, a lot of his colleagues, and he just kind of seemed to be a little bit lost, but he's, like, still gonna try and move on and find hope. And that's kind of how I was hoping it would end overall, but it just was kind of very, like, just happy, and like I said, a little bit fan servicey, a little bit fan fiction-y, where it's like, and everybody lived happily ever after, the end. Alright, and here is the biggest issue I had with the Hope Arc, was Kyoko somehow was able to survive the poisoning. What the hell? Like, I love Kyoko. I was devastated when I thought she was dead. It was so effective, and I was just like, oh my god, you know, this show is just going, it's going there, places that you didn't think it was gonna go. It's kind of like Game of Thrones, you know, feels like nobody is really safe, even, like, established characters who feel like they just can't die. And for them to just bring her back felt so cheap. The pharmacist, while she was in the killing game, managed to create an antidote for the poison, and it was used on Kyoko and she survived. There was that explanation Mikan gave at the end of how it happened. It just felt very hand-wavy, kind of just an excuse for Kyoko to live. And I'm gonna surprise some of you by saying I felt it would have been more effective if she had stayed dead. It would have really hammered home the point that, like, there's the despair, but there's the hope. You know, Makoto loses someone very important to him, but he trudges on, you know, with the former remnants of despair that he helped, and they go and they just keep, you know, go out there and create hope. It feels like he lost something in the process, but he's going to carry on her wishes, like her last words to him, you know, like, just don't stop, like, just, you're the hope, you know, you have to keep going no matter what happens. And I felt like it just would have been more effective if she had just stayed dead. But then they kind of just deus ex machina her back to life, and it just felt like it was just all undone. I don't know, just wasn't really too impressed with that. It felt very cheap. And the thing is too, like, if Makoto had lost Kyoko, but then, you know, he keeps going on, it also mirrors Kyosuke, who also lost people he cared about, but then he has to keep moving on, and there was that dichotomy throughout the whole future arc between Makoto and Kyosuke, where it's like they both want hope, but they want it in different ways, and then at the end they kind of came together and they realized that they both wanted the same thing. So if Makoto lost someone he cared about too, I felt like it would have just been in line with what the show was trying to do. Because the thing about Danganronpa is when characters die, it feels like it has weight to it. So to just be able to bring someone back, it just kind of feels like it undoes that a little bit. So that was my big issue with the ending of the Hope arc. So I wasn't a big fan of how it ended. It's nice in the series to have a happy ending, but I felt it went about it the wrong way. So overall, what did I think about all the animes as a whole? I enjoyed them. It was equal parts interesting and frustrating to watch. When the shows hit their highs, it was very effective. It invoked the spirit of the games very well, but then there were some moments that kind of made me scratch my head or just be frustrated with. I liked that they tied up some loose ends and they answered questions that were vague from the games. I did like the idea of the two arcs running concurrently, so that way you can kind of like have the story start to come together piece by piece. You get to learn more about the characters and their motivations and why they're doing things, and I just felt like it was a really clever idea. So overall, yeah, it was a fun watch. I recommend it if you guys haven't, watched the arcs and you have played the first few games. It does answer some questions, and it's not a bad time at all. Does it compare to the games? Absolutely not. The games are just so much better, but you can't really expect too much of an anime versus a game. The games are much more immersive, and they're paced better, and you get attached to the characters more because you get to spend more time with them. I just feel like Danganronpa does work better as a game, but the anime was really good as well, and now that I'm pretty much caught up with the story up until this point, I am excited to jump into V3, which will be coming soon. I know I've been saying that a lot, but I promise it will be coming soon. I don't have an exact date yet, but just keep an eye out for it. So I hope you guys enjoyed my ramblings on the Danganronpa 3 animes. I probably got some things wrong. There's a lot of things I know I missed. I apologize if you guys want to ask me some questions about specific things I didn't cover and what I thought about them. Leave those comments in the comment section down below. If I got some things wrong, please feel free to correct me. I am fully willing to admit that I could be wrong about things and my criticisms of them. But yeah, once again, I hope you guys enjoyed my little rant video about the Danganronpa Future Despair and Hope arc, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.